With the world going virtual, a majority of the workforce is facing a pretty significant challenge. And that challenge is that you have to get to know that person on your screen in a very short period of time. So what's the technique that helps you get to know someone as quickly as possible via phone, video, or even in person? It's by sharing your story. Telling your story is like going from 0 to 60 in getting to know someone. And in today's podcast, I'm going to show you how to effectively tell your story and build relationships remotely. Welcome back to the Stop the Vanilla podcast. I'm Steve Van Remortel. This podcast will give you the knowledge, the templates, and the practical steps to achieve what you want in your business, your career, and your life by having the right plan implemented by the right talent. Thank you for tuning in to the Stop the Vanilla podcast. Before we get into our podcast, I just wanted to share a little housekeeping with you on some upcoming trainings that we have. And all of our trainings can be held in person or virtual based on the times that we're in right now. So in September, we have our Shepherd of the Talent training coming up. And this is actually one of my favorite trainings because the Shepherd of the Talent training is we help leaders build that essential skill of developing other leaders. And so Shepherd of the Talent training includes training you on the behavioral sciences and then also training you on every talent process that in an organization. So leadership development, team development, conflict resolution, succession planning. All of those talent processes we train you on. So we train you on the sciences and the processes for you to go back into your own organization and build and manage your own talent development system. And so Shepherd of the Training is a really cool process. So check your notes for more information on our upcoming Shepherd of the Talent training. That again, we do virtually and in person. And we also have a lot of other workshop options that we can do virtually right now. One of those workshop options could be to help you develop a 4-month strategy and talent plan. We're in the early stages of this coronavirus thing, and how do you adapt your strategy in the moment to drive revenue to get you through this crisis that we're in? Because you have to be very agile in your planning. And so maybe there's a workshop that we could help your team work through something like that. What is the greatest challenge that we could help you solve via a virtual workshop right now? So check the show notes for more information on our workshops and maybe how we can help you. All right, so let's get into our podcast today on how do you efficiently build a relationship with someone when you're working remotely. So as I just mentioned, we're early on in this coronavirus crisis, and everybody is kind of working at home, working remotely. And so I wanted to share with you an incredible technique to help you build relationships, be it in person, be it on the phone, or be it remotely. And that technique is what we call telling your story. Now, how did I discover this technique of telling your story? So I do a lot of leadership development process or interviews, and I'd always ask the person, to tell me their story. Now, I'd get a good story, but they'd leave out some of the key events in their life that really shaped them. So what I discovered is that if I'm in a leadership development process or I want to I'm networking with somebody or I'm interviewing somebody, what I do is I tell them my story first. And I'm really transparent and vulnerable about my story. I talk about, the accomplishments in my life. I talk about the challenges. I talk about the things I'm working on right now. And so the power in telling your story first is that you create this level of transparency, this level of vulnerability that then you get in return. We have a saying here at Stop the Vanilla that if you want to get it, you got to first give it. And so if you want transparency and vulnerability, you have to first give it. And that's where this technique of telling your story, you tell your story first, and then you show the person, you almost train the person on how to tell their story, and you get basically the same thing back that you told them, right? The same components. Now, what are the key components of telling your story? So when I say to someone, hey, tell me your story, the first question I get is, well, where do I start? Well, where you start is where you were born. That is a great place to start. What was growing up like? What did your mom and or your dad do for a living? How many brothers and sisters did you have? And what birth order were you? These are all things that really shape you. If you remember, your disc behavioral style, your natural behavioral style is developed by the time you're 10, 11, 12 years old. And so all these things that you're telling the person about your story created who you are and how you're wired. So how many siblings did you have? Your education, your work history, and then really talk about your family, if you have a family and a significant other, if you have kids and so forth. And it's really about touching on the key things that shaped you into the person and the leader that you are today. And so your story is about how you got to this point, but it's also important for you to share your thoughts on your future as well. What are your goals? What's your vision? Where would you like to be 3 years professionally? Where would you like to be 3 years personally? It usually takes me around 3 minutes to tell my story. And again, I'm very open about, my upbringing, the things that were really healthy about my upbringing, the things that, the challenges that we had in my upbringing. And I tell my story about my work life as well. And it becomes relatively easy. It takes me about 3 minutes to tell my story. And then I ask the other person to do the same. And because you were very open and very honest with them, they do the same. And the next thing you know, we become buddies. When two people tell their story, there's no way, it's impossible not for you to become closer together. And so recently, I'll give you an example of that. Recently, I was with a leader in a client organization, and so I told my story first. Again, I put it out there. And this young lady then told me her story. So she was actually born in Japan, and her father immigrated to the United States right when she was born. And then a year later, her mom joined her father in the United States, and her grandparents raised her for the next 5 years. At the age of 6, she's telling me her story, and I'm hearing this going, wow. At the age of 6, she flew to the United States to meet her waiting parents at the airport. I mean, this story moved me as I imagined this little girl leaving her grandparents, who, is all she knew, and taking this long flight across the world to meet her parents in a new world for essentially the first time. I mean, just think about that. After hearing her story, I felt like I had known her for years. Hearing someone's story can be a really moving experience, because one of the sayings and one of the learnings from doing a lot of leadership development is that every person has issues. Every person has issues and have had challenges in their life. And so we have a saying here that if a person tells you they don't have an issue, that's their first one. And when you talk about your issues and you talk about your challenges and your accomplishments and your successes and the good parts of the life that you had, there's just this immediate connection. And so hearing someone's story is quite an experience. I am blessed in that I get to hear a lot of stories on a weekly basis, and I'm always blown away by the stories that I hear. Now, why are these stories so moving? Because you understand the challenges and the accomplishments in their life that help shape who they are at the core. Like, there are certain things that shaped each of us, and you get to understand that. I mean, you'll always find you always find something that you have in common while listening to the story. Like, oh, you love mountain biking, so do I. Or you love going to movies, so do I. Or this band or music or whatever it is. And the second you find that commonality is the second that relationship strengthens, right? You better understand their perspective and can provide them more compassion and grace as you're moving forward. Anytime someone tells you their story, you're going to be much more compassionate and provide them more grace and be more empathetic, if you will, because you understand what made them. You understand the person sitting across from you or the person that's on that screen, right, working remotely with you. Understanding their journey may also offer you the information to help them build on that story. In a situation of a leadership development process, understanding their path, and in the case of the leadership development process, I also have their behavioral science results. That allows me to help them see their future, help them see the path. And so understanding their story helps you speak into maybe their future. It could mean just listening or speaking into it based on what you've learned from your experiences. And I can just tell you the tell me your story technique, be it virtual or in person for interviewing, is the way I start all my interviews. And we've done a podcast on that called Customized Interviewing. So if you want to learn how to use Tell Your Story for interviewing, that would be a great podcast to listen to. So all these stories that I hear on a weekly basis, I'm amazed at the journey many of them have taken to this point, and how blessed I am to get to know the person to their core, because this technique works. And every single story includes issues, accomplishments, and the potential to do great things. And one of the coolest parts of hearing somebody else's story is that you then grow as well in your story. I mean, the things that I have learned from people as they have told me their stories have helped me become a better person, a better leader, a better advisor, a better developer of talent, or a shepherd of the talent. And so this technique works. And so next time you work with a person the first time, or some of you work with for 10 years, take 5 to 10 minutes. It'd take about 10 minutes for both of you to tell your story. I encourage you to say, hey, it'd be great for us to get to know each other a little bit better. So what I would suggest is I'll tell you my story, and then you can tell me yours. And the more in-depth and the more vulnerable and more transparent you are in telling your story is exactly how that person's going to tell their story. Now, what are the benefits that you're going to experience in using this technique to build relationships, which I can just tell you right now, it works virtually just as well as it does in person. And it even works great on the phone. The number one benefit of hearing someone's story is that you build this deeper, this more productive, this more connected relationship in a very short period of time, especially in a remote work setting. It builds deeper and more effective relationships in all areas of your life. I mean, I use this technique all the time. Hey, tell me your story. Hey, tell me your story. You learn more about yourself and further your growth by gaining the perspective of others through listening to their stories. And again, you can help others based on the journeys that they had. You can speak into maybe what you see as their next steps. And one of the benefits of using this technique in interviewing is it helps you make the right hire the first time. Understanding who the core of a person is and making sure that their values align with the values of your organization and that this is the type of person we want on our team, that's a home run. So as we go into this virtual first world, for who knows how long this is going to be, this technique will help you build relationships quick and at a much deeper level. My challenge for you is the next time you and a person meet remotely, take the first step in getting to know them by telling your story and then asking them to tell me your story. Lead with transparency and watch the depth of your relationship. Watch the depth of your connection just form and grow. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. I hope this simple yet effective technique can help you and your team as you do more work virtually. And let me know how we can help you achieve what you want in your business, your career, and your life with the right plan and the right channel. Thank you for listening to the Stop the Vanilla podcast. If today's episode would bring value to someone you know, make sure to pass it on to them. If this podcast has brought you value, make sure you leave a review, helping others find it as well. If you want to receive our content, head over to stopthevanilla.com and sign up for The Scoop, a weekly email of quick tips on strategy, talent, and leadership. Or download a ton of free resources and templates. Thanks again for tuning into the Stop the Vanilla podcast, where we help you achieve what you want in your business, your career, and your life by having the right plan, implemented with the right talent.
You be my regular style. All right, boys.